Hello and welcome to a conversation with the legendary Mr. Steve Cropper. I'm your host, Eric Miller. This is part of the Pods and Sods network, and I want to thank you first, as always, for clicking the download button and the subscribe button and whatever series of buttons you've clicked in order to find this episode. It's always super appreciated, so thank you. Boy, I was thrilled to chat with Steve. You know, I'm a big fan of sort of classic soul and R&B and Stax Records and all that stuff, and man, he's all over it. Such a legend and such an honor. And I was actually just recently at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and, saw his handwritten lyrics to Mr. Pitiful and, strangely the piece of Otis Redding's playing, which is kind of a weird thing to exhibit, but nonetheless, it was cool. And, we go through his long career. Obviously, the Marquees, the house band at Stax Records, Booker T and the MGs, all that stuff, Green Onions, his connection with the Beatles, as they were scheduled or tentatively scheduled to record Revolver at Stax, and we talk about that, and we talk about sort of the interracial element of Booker T and the MGs that kind of went unspoken, which was awesome at the time. So we go through all that. Obviously, Otis Redding, huge. Sam and Dave, Wilson Pickett, just everything. I even asked him about playing on Big Stars Records. So yeah, a real thrill to chat with Steve, and hopefully you'll enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. So without any further ado, Mr. Steve Cropper. Gives me great pleasure to welcome the legendary Mr. Steve Cropper. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, glad to be here, Eric. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you.
for asking me to do this.
Thank you, sir. A real honor to chat with you. You have a career that's expansive is an understatement. So
I tell people many careers, and it's a little late to start a new one, but.
Right.
We'll work as hard as we can.
So I want to hit on a few things. Obviously, we can't hit everything because we'd be here for like 12 hours. But kind of going back to the beginning, as I understand it, as a kid, you got your very first guitar from a Sears and Roebuck's catalog. Is that right?
I did. Not wishing hard luck on any newcomers or whatever. But, I really did work hard at that, and I did what I had to do in that day and time, and that was mowing yards, shining shoes, setting bowling pins, and doing whatever I could to raise $20. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. That's just a breath of air in most people's pockets. But in those days, $20 was a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, when you could drive all weekend on 50 cents worth of gas, $20 meant a lot. You go to a movie for a dime. So... Yeah, but I did that, and I saved up $20, and my mom always told me, if it hadn't been for me, you'd never be in the music business. I'm going, what are you talking about, Mom? Well, you remember they charged you a 25-cent delivery fee, and you didn't have the extra quarter, and I gave you a quarter. If I hadn't have done that, you'd have never played guitar. So my mother was always proud of that.
That's awesome.
A true story. I'm not making that up. I have to tell people sometimes, that's a true story. It sounds bizarre, but it's not.
Right, and you grew up kind of in a rural, like literally on a farm, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, I started on a farm, grew up on a farm, and my dad nailed a job, I guess, because of his military experience on the police force in West Plains, Missouri, which was about 19 miles away. Okay. Which, to me, in those days, moving from the farm to a city was a big deal. And about a year and a half later, he interviewed for a special agent for the Frisco Railroad and got it, and they transferred us to Memphis, Tennessee. Oh. And, that's like going from your backyard to Disney World or something. I don't know. It's pretty amazing. And I was only 10 years old, and my eyes were bigger than my head. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And when we got there, or approaching it, my dad, I was asleep in the back seat, and I remember him saying, "Son, you better get up. You might want to see this." And that was a bridge going across the Mississippi River, which was a mile wide. That was the biggest body of water I'd ever seen,
Right.
And then we get in there, and I start hearing music on the radio. We didn't, on the farm, we didn't have radio. We didn't have any electricity till till I was about 8 or 9 years old before we had electricity. And of course, we had it in West Plains, but the playlist on the local stations in West Plains was extremely limited.
Right.
You know,
Right.
if we heard how much is that doggy in the window, you know, once a week, that was a big deal. So I'm hearing, I get to Memphis and turn on a radio in the car, and I'm hearing all this gospel music and all, and I was just taken back by it. It was just unbelievable. I couldn't get over the feeling of that music. I never heard it before. I thought it was great, and so really that's what I fell into.
Yeah.
And later turned into rhythm and blues, but it was basically the gospel root of it that grabbed me. So
was there
that's what I did the rest of my life, and still doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Was there a point that so you know, you're a young guy, you obviously had passion because you saved up for this guitar, and then you hear this music and you maybe see this world of opportunity. Was there a point that you can kind of remember, like, I got to do that?
Well, you know, we started with a band with another friend of mine who played guitar, and it was just the two of us, and we auditioned for a disc jockey one time, and he really liked us, and he said, "Is this all you have? If you had a bass player or a drummer, I'd put you on one of my sock hops." He did a sock hop, what they call it,
Right.
every weekend, like on a Friday night, and we said, well, this is it. And I mean, the next day we were scrambling around calling everybody we could find.
Right.
To
Right.
either get a bass player or a drummer, and we found a young drummer in the 9th grade, and his name was Terry Johnson, just passed away recently, but he was with us from day one. Now, the rest of the story that got me into it, whether it was a turning point or not, was our saxophone player's mother always wanted a record shop. She wanted to own and run a record shop,
Right.
which turned into be Satellite Records, if you read the history books. And her brother, Jim Stewart, this was Estelle Axton, and Estelle, I forget what her maiden name was, but Estelle Axton and Jim Stewart, and that's where you get Stewart Axton, S-T-A-X.
Right.
Anyway, he wanted a recording studio. And he goes to her and says, "I really want to put together a recording studio. Can you lend me the money?" So she goes, "Well, not really, Jim, but what are you thinking about? And if you'll let me have a record shop up front," you know, what she did, she mortgaged her house and raised money for them to put together a studio and a record shop. And knowing this, I asked her one day, I said, "Could I work at the record shop and be a salesman?"
Right.
And in the back of my head, if it's a turning point, yes, because that got me closer to a studio.
Right. Right.
Which was in the back, you know, that her brother ran. So that's what I did. And in my career, as it turned out, I worked very hard, and I think I did a decent job. She goes to her brother Jim one day and says, "Jim, you're going to have to start paying Steve because he spends more time in the studio than he does in the record shop." So anyway, they came to an agreement. He put me on salary and hired me, and I did everything. I swept floors, and I logged tapes, and I did everything I could do. And luckily, the engineer one day put me on a session, and I had already been doing a few sessions, so it wasn't really new to me, but in other studios across town.
Right.
And I played on this session, and that's how I started doing sessions at Stax. I guess I played the right thing, and they kept me on and kept me going, and that's what we did. And then later with other musicians, with older musicians, more seasoned and knew what they were doing, mixed with our high school band, we did an instrumental, or the engineer did, Chips Moman, and that became the hit record Last Night. number 3 in the nation for a while. And we ran that gambit and did Dick Clark and did a tour and did all that sort of stuff. And I said, well, this isn't for me. I didn't like being on the road. And
right.
so
really?
At the end of that tour, I said, guys, I'm headed back to Memphis. I told the saxophone player, Charles Packy Axton, I said, I'm going to call your mom and see if I can get my old job back, which I did. She said, well, yeah, Steve, you're calling at the right time because I've been looking to hire somebody, and you're here. You already know the business, so come on.
Right.
And that's how it all got started. And the next year, with the house band, with Booker T and the MGs.
Yeah, wow.
And we come up with a little song called Green Onions, which I was just listening. That's my ringer tone, and I got it from my father-in-law. I had that one day, and Green Onions starts playing. I said, what's going on? He said, that's my ringtone on my cell phone. I said, I want that. So I had his son downloaded into my phone, and I've been using it ever since.
Every time.
I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. To me, it sounds better coming over that phone than it did on the original record.
Oh, that's probably sacrilegious to a lot of people for you to say it that way.
I know, and I'm going to get in trouble for it, but I still feel that way. I just, like I told you when you called, I said I let it ring a little bit,
During the house band days at Stax, and you're sort of, recording, 3-4 songs a day or more.
Or more.
Yeah. Does it ever, and it's, this isn't meant to sound like kind of a negative question, but does it ever lose its charm in a way because you're sort of punching a clock, or was it always
No, it never
vibrant?
did. And I've had other musicians that run some of those sessions say the same thing.
Right.
And it's a little strong, but we always referred to it at the time. Said when we left the sidewalk and went into the studio, it was sort of like going to church. I mean, it was like
Wow.
a haven, a place of, you felt comfortable in there, you felt safe in there. And like most recording studios, once you're in there and working, you don't know what time it is. There's no windows, so you know if it's daylight or nighttime, if it's raining out or whatever it's doing. You just don't know.
Right.
And you're in there making music the best you can. I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, we had to start pretty much on time every day and quit on time because most of the musicians had night gigs where they played live music.
Mm-hmm.
They had to get home, get their shower, and eat and do whatever they did so they get ready for their gig. Some guys started at, as early as 8, and other guys started around 9. And everybody was getting off stage at like midnight, 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Al Jackson, they never finished the Manhattan Club till about 2 or 3 in the morning. And when they were recording Al Green and people like that, they would record early in the morning. And then sometimes I'd have to go over and get Al up because he hadn't had any sleep.
Right. Wow.
And I'd say, Al, we got a session. He didn't care. He's asleep.
Wow.
So his wife said, Steve, you're going to have to poke him with a broom because he's going to come up swinging. And he usually did. So it was kind of a routine to go get Al on those sessions. Yeah.
Yeah. Al it's interesting because he was a Stax guy, but he was also recording, he was moonlighting with Al Green, like you said.
He was a staff member. He was on salary as a staff member, but yet he still maintained his loyalty to Willie Mitchell. Right. And when Willie started doing Al Green, Al played on most of those hits. He didn't have time or couldn't book and play on a lot of the album cuts because they were cut during the day and so forth.
Right.
So he'd come back over, the Stax and play on our stuff. So in my opinion, I've always said this, he was the world's greatest rhythm and blues drummer. He may not be the world's greatest drummer. I thought he was, but he was definitely the greatest R&B drummer that ever lived. I mean, there was just something about Al that he put magic in every song that he played on.
Yeah, it's a combination of those guys.
But Al, always set the groove to make other musicians play at their peak or play at their best.
Right.
and that being said, when you lay a track like that, that just makes the artist who's singing their performance just rise up and become great.
Right.
So it's a combination. I agree with that. It's that no man made any hit record, and and the same thing with a basketball team. No one guy, he might make the last point that wins the score, but it takes the whole team to get him there to that one shot. So I've always looked at it as a team effort when you're in the studio. If one guy's slacking off, probably it's not going to do as well as if everybody's in there pitching in together.
With those 4 guys in place, obviously Booker, Duck, Al, and yourself, is there?
You couldn't miss.
Is it? Well, I was going to say, is there a lot of the way I look at that is kind of like a brotherhood, right? And I don't know if I'm projecting that,
Yeah,
but like, was there a lot of trust and experimentation? Like, you guys had
it
complete faith
was,
in each
and
other,
you could say however you want to phrase it, but it was sort of reading at the minds. We all sort of knew what that other person was going to do next.
right?
And even live or in the studio, we could anticipate what was getting ready to happen next in the next tenth of a second. and on stage with the MGs, we didn't really look at each other a lot. We just sort of knew where we were going. It wasn't that we were over rehearsed or just knew the songs that well, because I think if you really broke it down, every time we did one of our hits, it was always slightly different than the last time. And, the changes may be the same, but, a lot of the inflections are a little bit different. But we just sort of anticipated where the next guy was going to go, and then you played with your heart and played with your feeling. And you knew that.
Right.
You didn't have to look at each other to say, are we going to a G? Are we going to, you just didn't do that. We just kind of knew where we were going.
That's
So
awesome.
you're right. It was an absolute brotherhood. It was like a group of, let's say, 4 guys, but it came off as one.
Yeah.
And that's the way we all work.
Yeah, and one thing that can't be overstated about that, and I'm sure you're aware, and I want to ask about it, is, the fact that it's an interracial group, maybe the first, right, or at least one of the first at that
we didn't
level.
look at it that way.
Of course,
We still
right?
don't look at it that way.
Yeah, of course. But
I know there's really only Booker and I left, but we don't see each other as
of course,
being different. We're family. Always have been.
Was that ever a thing, though? I mean, as pure as it is with the 4 of you guys as brothers, unfortunately, the world at that time maybe didn't. You know
Unfortunately,
what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah. So did you ever have any
any
issues like on the road in the South, anything like that?
I don't think they were ever major, but it was brought forward, and it's sort of like it just rolled off our backs. Like you'd say, water off a duck's back.
Right.
It passed very quickly. Let's just say we do. I mean, this has happened. I'm not going to go into detail, but where we'd play a concert and then we'd go down to check into a hotel in those days, and they go, oh, wait a minute, we can't do this, And we go, okay, we just get in the car and we drive out to some place at the edge of town that needed the money and didn't care, and so there we'd go. We'd spend the night and get some rest and drive home. So it was never a problem. Never ever a problem with us. The discrimination thing, I don't think. Since we didn't address it that much, I don't know how it affected Booker and Al. They never did say. But I know that Duck and I were never affected by it. We just didn't look at it that way. We didn't have to go say, hey, this is okay, he's our buddy. We never had to do any of that kind of stuff. We just roll with the flow. We just whatever happened, and we went with it.
That's
so
awesome.
We were never in any danger of anything. Excuse me. We were never in any danger of any of that kind of stuff. So. In the days that technically, I guess, from the media, when things really heated up, I guess the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, we weren't even in Memphis. I don't know what would have happened had we been in Memphis, if anything. Right. We were in San Francisco getting ready to play the Fillmore. So,
right. Yeah.
We weren't, we were affected by the news, but, it was, by the time we got back to Memphis, it wasn't over with, but it was like a new day. It was sort of like when 9/11 happened here, we were on tour, we being the original Blues Brothers band, were on tour in Turkey.
Right,
and some of the guys were apprehensive because they're from New York and whatever, or live in Manhattan, and they were a little apprehensive about doing a show. And I said, guys, the show must go on, that kind of old adage. And we did. And they said, man, thanks, Cropper, for having that attitude. It was great. It was never even mentioned. And we had 5,000 kids that evening, and it could have turned ugly if they wanted to, but they never weren't even bothered by it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Most of them hadn't even heard about it yet. So, and it's just interesting that we've never been affected by any of this kind of stuff.
And I think that speaks way more than maybe you recognize, because it's just a natural, like I said, it's a brotherhood. It is what it is, and either it's up to y'all to accept it or not, and that's on you, right? So, incredible at that time that it was a non-issue.
I think if you have an attitude about something, I think even if you don't open your mouth or go in front of the camera or whatever, I think the other side, the other people, the fans or whatever, pick up on that.
Yeah.
If you're carrying around an attitude or something, I really believe that. I don't know, but I don't have an attitude about stuff like that. And you know, when you see things in the news, and somebody made a comment about some recent protest thing, said, you know, it's sad, but most of the people protesting don't even know what they're protesting.
Right.
They're just there for the event. You know, it's sort of like, well, when we do a concert, when you're playing for, you know, 25, 30,000 people, is everybody there for the same reason? Or are they there just for the event?
Right.
And sometimes it seems like only the first 2 rows are really there for the music. They got there early and they wanted to see that artist. And most of the people come to the event and they can't even see the artist because
Right.
they've got binoculars. It's pretty crazy. So, but
Yeah.
they all seem to have a good time. I mean, you get everybody waving in unison. And you know, used to they'd light their Bic lighters and do them at night. Well, now they do the cell phones. So they turn on their flashlight and everybody's doing that. It's pretty cool
Right.
to see, you know, 5,000 to 10,000 people doing that, or 20, 25, or 30. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, flash forward to the, you know, here you are in recent years performing for the first African American president, right? So, you know, again, the point is, you know, like every step is a step of progress. And Booker T and the MGs was definitely a step in that direction. When you did that performance, were you aware of that in any way, or? You know, holy shit, here I am.
Not while I was playing.
No.
not at all.
Right.
I go into my thing and I do what I do. I don't, you know, but, you know, we've played for several presidents, and
Right.
It's always been a nice thing. And something I've always said, if you get invited to come to the White House, you better get on a plane or a bus or something and get up there.
Right.
It's just, how many chances do you get to do that in your lifetime?
Well, if you're Steve Cropper, apparently you get several.
Well, you get asked a few times. I don't know about it.
Right.
I think it's all the same. I mean, it's, you know where you're at, and but you're there really representing the whole nation. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
You're always gonna. I don't care what side you're on. You're only gonna please about 50% of the people most of the time.
Right.
You know, if you got 50% for you, you're gonna have 50% against you. And my rebuttal on a few people that thought, why are you up there doing that? The negative people. And I said, thing about me, if one artist from Stax gets one gig out of me going on stage and playing for the president, it's all worth it. Yeah. If they don't get it, it was still worth it. But it's not about me. It's about the artist. And that's the way I've always looked at it.
I want to ask you about the Beatles because you've kind of worked with each of them, but specifically I want to ask about the rumors or the stories that they were scheduled to record what would become Revolver at Stax.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I think I do remember it well, and I don't read everything that every history book has written about it, but it wasn't something that was made up. It was true. Basically, they put the feeler out.
Right.
And they had been listening to Stax Records, and they wanted to record some stuff at Stax. I think basically they just wanted to see if it would do great or if it was, an experiment. I don't know.
Right.
But they sent Brian Epstein over, and he was there for several days to try to set things up and do a little advance work on it. And I don't know whether we agreed to it or not, but I knew technically that they didn't really have anything whatsoever to worry about. This is not New York. This is not Philadelphia. And on the streets in Macklemore Avenue, they might have had a few fans come down there,
right?
But they weren't going to be rushed by masses of people. There was no need for any worry of security and that kind of thing.
Right.
Even though they did, there wasn't any need for it. And I never could convince Brian of that. And he goes back to England, and about 2 weeks later, I guess, he called and he says, I've been talking to the guys, and they're not real sure about the security in Memphis, and I never could convince him. He said, would you be willing to go to New York and maybe record with them at Atlantic? And I said, well, if that's what they really want to do, I'll make myself available. I'll come up to New York. I don't care. It'd be great. And I had met the guys before when we were over in England in the Stax Boat Tour in '67.
Right.
I had met them all. I hadn't worked with any of them, but I'd met them, and they were very very nice to us. Came down to hear us play a little pre-show. I don't know if they went to any of the big shows. I never did hear one way or the other. Whether they did or not, they might have been up there. I don't know. But they came to hear us at a little place. I think it was called the Bag of Nails. And we just did an unannounced little warm-up show that it was a little small club. And that's when I met them, and three of them.
Right.
Of course. Me being the guitar player, I go, this is great, guys. Where's George?
Right.
He was off recording something somewhere, and it was funny. I get to meet the Beatles, but where's George?
Right.
Then later, out in L.A., I get to go. George had rented a place out in Beverly Hills and invited me up. He said, I want Cropper to come by. And we sit there and talk. It seemed like all afternoon, at least 2.5, 3 hours.
Wow.
Just he and I. He was sitting in a couch. I was sitting in a chair in his den, and we talked and just told stories and, whatever. It's just what a nice guy he was. So basically, I didn't work with George on any sessions, and I didn't get a chance to work with Paul. I played on 2 or 3 different things with Ringo, and I was in the house band on his first record that he did.
Right.
And I played on a track or two of John Lennon's rock and roll record.
Right.
But he left L.A. and went to New York to finish it, and I didn't play on any of the New York sessions. I don't know how the credits read. I don't even have a copy of the album, unfortunately, but I need to get one.
Right.
But they're all nice, and I've met Paul several times. When I say several times, at least 3 or 4 times. And every time Paul looks at me and he says, Cropper, you and I have got to do something together. And he's been saying that for 30-some-odd years.
Any day now, right?
Any day now, we'll do something. And so it's maybe good that we didn't. I have no idea. He's such a talented guy. It's just unbelievable. And the last time I saw them, he was inducting Ringo into the Hall of Fame, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which was real cool. Mm-hmm. And Ringo spots me and comes up and gives me a quick peck on the neck and or side of the face or something. It was really cool, and I appreciate that. I was up there inducting the Five-Away Elves, Lowman Paulin and the Five-Away Elves.
Nice. Have they ever?
That's why I was there.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Booker T and the MGs did a version of Eleanor Rigby. Did they ever comment on your version of it?
No, I don't know. I never heard a comment from the guys, anybody that that we'd covered any of their music or anything.
Right. How about moving on to Otis Redding, a big part of your career. Right. Can you share a little bit about the as I understand it, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay was in progress when he was when he tragically passed, and didn't hear the final mix.
He did. I tell the story sometimes in my show before I do Dock of the Bay, that there's a lot of misnomers in the publicity of it and the history of it.
Right.
And it even fooled me for a long time. And what happened was Otis was coming in to record and had taken some time off. And he was out at the Fillmore, playing the Fillmore out in San Francisco. And usually the lead or the headliner artist, Bill Graham, who had the Fillmore and ran that, always offered his boathouse in Sausalito to the headliner.
Right.
This time being Otis. And I found this out later that Otis took him up on it. Instead of staying, there was a place called the Jack Tar Motel off of Highway 101 there that he put most of the artists, and that's where we used to stay all the time. He didn't offer his boathouse because we were 4 guys. So right. Anyway, when Otis, he called me, he flew in and called me from the airport, which is really something he never did. I mean, he always came in either by bus or by his plane or whatever. He'd go check into the motel or hotel, and then he would call me and say, we're going to write tonight, or, what time's the session tomorrow, any of those things. He called me from the airport, and he just, Crop, I just want to make sure you're there. I'm coming right down. I've got a hit. And he did. Nice. But it wasn't finished, and that's the way he did things. He always had, I say, 14, 15 songs. He probably had more than that.
Right.
But he carried around his guitar, not in a case, all the time. And he always had it right there with him. And all of his moments that he was able to, he would be writing some song, and usually they were unfinished. And so I helped him finish it. But he started the song out, I watch the ships roll in, I watch them roll away again. And I'm kind of a purist, I guess, I don't know. I'm not a stickler about detail, but I am a purist. I said, Otis. He said, what, you don't like it? I said, no, but have you ever thought about if a ship takes on water or rolls, it's going to take on water and sink? And he just simply said, no, Crop, that's what I want. Well, right. It took me years to figure out he was not singing about ships, right. At least by standards. He was singing about the ferries that come from Oakland to Sausalito and bring the cars and people, and what do? They roll up a big wake whenever they go to park. All the ferries do that.
Right.
And that's what he was singing about. But he said, I watch the ships roll in and I watch them roll away again. I always thought he was talking about some ship going under the Golden Gate Bridge. I was out right. riding one day with Robert Cray, and he wanted that Sunday off, and so I was at a sports bar down there in Sausalito getting a cheeseburger and watching the NFL, and I was seeing this ferry come over, and it goes to park, and I'm watching. I said, man, I never realized that.
All these years. That's great.
All these years. I didn't know either. I just helped him ride. I left my home in Georgia, and I wrote the bridge, that kind of stuff,
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away again. I'm just sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my home in Georgia, and I headed for the Frisco Bay. 'Cause I've got nothing to live for, and look like nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Look like nothing's gonna change. Everything seems to stay the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do, so I guess I'll remain the same. Sitting here resting my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. Listen, for 2,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Now I'm just sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tides roll away. Ooh, sitting on the dock of the bay, I'm wasting time.
With Otis, I wrote about Otis. It's real simple. Right. Any fan can get out any of Otis's stuff. If it's got my name on it, just listen to the lyrics. It'll be about Otis almost every time.
Any memories specifically about the King and Queen, like that duet record?
Other than the fact that we just had a ball. I mean, it was common for Duck and I, and Booker as well, and then we would take something that's familiar to us and just turn it around musically, just do something different. Or we would do the groove of one song. Like in that song, I think we was off of a ba-da-da-dum-dum, like a Marvin Gaye Motown thing. Mm-hmm. We put on Tramp. And it just always amuses me, too, that we even thought of that. Why? Because these are songs that Duck would be playing on stage every night. So he kind of knew those licks, you know. And I was always in the studio. I mean, I started out playing, you know, nightclubs and all, but I very quickly got off of that once we had Last Night. So I only had about a year or two of doing other people's music, and the rest of the time in the studio, I was always creating new stuff all the time.
Right.
Trying not to sound like somebody else, but we'd pick up a lick or two from a hit song that was familiar in those days to disc jockeys and fans. And it would be different, and we did that with a lot of songs, and changed them around and put new grooves on them, and sort of make them our own composition, even though it wasn't, you know.
Right.
And that's what I remember about the King and Queen was we just had a blast, and we got to do that again with Carla when Atlantic had their 40th, and I think we got Paul Schaefer or Paul volunteered to sing the Otis part, and it turned out pretty good. So
Nice.
We had a lot of fun doing that.
You mentioned Marvin Gaye, and I'm just throwing this out there. Did you ever have any interaction with him?
Well, yeah, we did. We went to his dressing room at a gig and said, "Man, we've got a plane we got to catch because we've got another gig. Would you mind if we went on before you?"
Right.
And Marvin says, "No, man, I'd be glad to help." And then after it was done, he's over in our dressing room. He said, "Man, why did you guys do that to me?" He said, "Do what to you?" He said, "I can't go out there and follow that." I said, "Yes, you can, man. You're Marvin Gaye. Come on, give me a break."
That's awesome.
But we did play the hot dance music. That's what we did, and that's really what made if Booker T and the MGs became famous for any reason other than their records, it was because we played really good dance music.
Yeah. And
that's because of Al Jackson. I mean, we weren't really on stage trying to show our musicianship and all that. Who cares about all that stuff? But Al would play those dance beats, and we'd get into a groove, and it filled the dance floor every time.
Right.
And he was very, very good at that. He could read an audience and knew what they were wanting to dance to next. He just knew how to call it. And so if we just played whatever Al Jackson called out, that's what we played next.
Awesome. You mentioned...
yeah, that was our encounter with Marvin Gaye. Golly, I wish we could have played behind him on a session. I mean, he's such a groove when he sang. And I think, I forget the name of the song, but they actually played it and they took the track off and just played his vocal. It was so spot on, and the tempo, and it just made you feel good. So he contributed. He's sort of the Otis Redding of Motown, I would think.
Yeah.
Even though Smokey's fabulous too, they're all great. Stevie and everybody's great, but Marvin was something special. He was something else.
No doubt. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about Soul Man. The way you describe Green Onions as your ringtone. Every time you hear that opening lick of Soul Man, do you go, "That's me"?
Well, no, but when I do the song live, I say, "I bet this audience can name this song in 2 notes," and I'll play the 2 notes and stop. You know?
Right.
Everybody goes crazy, and you know what it's going to be, you know.
Right.
But I don't think about it that way, and it was funny that Sam Moore said, "Play it, Steve," and it was on, I think, the 3rd take. That's the one and only time he ever did it. It just happened to be the right take. So we left it in there. And I even asked us, "Do you want me to edit that out?" And they said, "No, man, leave that in there. That's cool."
Yeah.
And then, of course, with the Blues Brothers, Belushi kind of embellished all that and really made a big point about it, you know. And at the end of the song, he'd say, Doug Dunn, Steve Cropper, you know, that kind of a thing. So
Right.
we got more than we deserved, is what I'd say.
Oh, I disagree. When the Blues Brothers, how did that idea first come to you? Like, did they call you up and say, "Hey"?
Well, you know, we've been into rehearsing. They had been rehearsing, I think, for 2 days before I got up there. And I just told Belushi, I said, I'm in the middle of mixing a record. There's no way I can get up there tomorrow. But if you can start without me and I can get up there in a couple of days, I'll be glad to do it with you. And Duck was already up there.
Okay.
So I went in and heard what they had been doing and played some and added my little stuff to it. And I literally did say this. I said, why don't you guys do something people can dance to and da-da-da-da. And Belushi said, well, what? You got an idea? And I looked at Schaefer and I said, you remember Soul Man, don't you? He said, sure. So I hit Soul Man. He starts singing it. He knew the song and he starts singing it. And then he starts dancing. Then Aykroyd got up and come up here with that. You know, Dan Aykroyd couldn't dance, but he was just doing that crazy stuff. And people were laughing and going nuts. And Belushi turned around and he said, man, I like that. But he said, it's too high for me. Can you bring it down some? I said, well, I guess. So the easiest way for me, I just brought it down a whole, you know, a four down to the 6 minor and played it in the key of E instead of G. And he said, man, that's great. That's great. Well, it turned out to be our only big chart record, I guess, was Soul Man.
Yeah. It's sort of a whole.
But it was a lot of fun. And whose idea was whatever, I have no idea. I know, a lot of people have taken credit for, you know, coming up with the Blues Brothers, but Doc Thomas, I think, is the one that Belushi gave credit to.
Right.
And I know there was a guy up from Canada, I think he was from Canada, Mitch Glazer, who wrote the book about the Blues Brothers, and they said he was the one that suggested a lot of the blues stuff and all that. When Doc Thomas said, hey, man, why don't you guys get some hats and those sunglasses and skinny ties. I know that Doc Thomas got credit for that.
But for you, for your involvement, it just
doesn't matter.
For you, it was
well,
it was a phone call. You just got a call one day.
So I don't know if that's all it was. He called and he'd already got Duck done. And the funny thing, because I talked with Phil Walden, who was Otis's manager, and he said, this is a strange thing. He said, Belushi was down and we were in a limo and had gone to dinner. And he said, man, I'm putting a band together. And he suggested getting myself and Duck involved in it. And he said, well, who's this guy, Steve Cropper? And he said, well, you know him. He plays with Levon, this guy with the long hair. And he said, that's not the guitar player. He's a roadie. Something like that. And Phil said, I had to sit there and convince him that you were the guy with the long hair that played guitar. I'll tell you where it started from. He saw Levon Helm and the RCO All-Stars play a New Year's Eve gig at the Palladium in New York. And he made the comment, if I ever have a band or put a band together, I want those guys playing with me. Nice. Well, most of them were from Saturday Night Live. All the horns were. Right. So when they did put a band together and got that opportunity that Steve Martin asked John and Danny to open for him at the Universal Amphitheater. And that's when Steve Martin had the record King Tut. Mm-hmm. And they booked him out there for 9 dates, I think. And he said, they said, we need an opening act. And he said, well, can I bring in whoever I want to? And they said, yeah. So he called John and Belushi said, well, you know, we don't do stand-up comedy. That's not what we do. And so Steve said, the story that I got, I wasn't there. Steve said, well, I don't care what you do. And John said, well, can we play music? He said, yeah. So that's when they decided to put the band together. Nice. They were on hiatus anyway. Nice. You know, it was the summer. They were through filming for that season or so.
Right.
And it happened to just fall in line. They had given all of the main characters from Saturday Night Live a film crew to go out and do this little documentary called Things I Did Last Summer, or What I Did. I forget what they called it, What I Did Last Summer, whatever. Right. And they all, Lorraine Newman had a thing, and Gilda Radner had a deal, and all of them did something. So it was pretty cool. So that was their contribution. When I say their contribution, Aykroyd and Belushi's contribution was, you know, playing the amphitheater.
Nice.
So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, boy, that's like
a lot of things fell in line. I guess it just meant to be. So.
Awesome. I want to ask you about kind of a random thing that's on your resume, I guess, or discography that maybe you don't get asked a lot about, but you played on Big Star's third record. Do you remember that? How did that come? That's an interesting
Well,
thing.
I can tell you how it came about. I had internally, I had left Stax back at 70 and went to agreed to do a partnership thing in the studio on TMI.
Right.
And so that kind of folded after about 3 years. And I called my friend who ran Ardent, and we had done many projects at Ardent as a second studio at the old Ardent and then the second Ardent. And I called my friend John Fry, and I said, "Have you got any space over there where I could have an office, and I'll maybe bring some artists in and record and all that?" He said, "Absolutely." So that's what I was doing over there.
Right.
Jim Dickerson, I think, was producing Big Star, and came over one day and he said, "Could I borrow you for a minute to play on something?" And I said, "Well, I guess, yeah, sure." So I think it was just a track. I don't remember playing on that song, and it was called Femme Fatale or something like that.
Right, it was a cover.
And I think I just think I played on the track and they sang on it later, and lo and behold, that was the album that made it, and the track they pulled out and publicity on it. I'm like, wow. I'm getting all this free publicity for playing on a group I didn't even meet, didn't know. I knew them all, but I mean, different level.
Right.
But Jim Dickerson is responsible for that. He's not with us anymore, but he was a great producer and did a lot on his own. Produced, what was his big one? He produced a lot of Rock Hooter stuff and different artists. Very, very accomplished in his own right. It was a good friend of mine.
Cool.
So that's how it came about. I wish I knew more and could say more, but I can't. I mean, it's not anything there. I could have made something up, but I don't do that.
Well, I'm sure it's hard to remember.
But I'm glad to be
all
part
the
of
stuff
it.
all the things you've played on. I'm sure.
Well, yeah, I've had interviews. People be interviewing. They get through and they said, "Do us a favor. We know this is you playing. Could you identify the artist?" I listened up. God, I don't remember even playing on that, but I guarantee you that's me.
Right.
So,
right.
I did a lot of tracks that either they took the vocalist off that we played behind and put somebody else on it, and things come out that I didn't even know. And I did a lot of stuff in California.
Right.
I was out there 13 years, so I played on hundreds and hundreds of sessions.
Yeah. Yeah, there had to be ones where, like the Green Onions or the Soul Man or certain ones that that feel magic as you're doing them, right? So are there songs that you hear now that you have a tactile memory of the recording of it?
Well, it is true, and I do. I hear something on the radio, and I go, "Wow, I played on that," and I remember the whole session and everything.
Right.
But the publicity always goes back to the Stax stage.
Right.
So there's very, very little publicity or even talk about anything that I did in the 13 years I was in L.A.
Right.
Which I played on a lot of chart records, a lot of big ones, some number ones. But I don't publicize that. It is what it is. And but they still want to know about, like, you included. You want to know about Booker T. You want to know about Otis Redding.
Right.
And there's all those great things in between. And it was nice you brought up Carla Thomas and the Otis stuff. And one of my favorites I didn't talk about, but the album we did called The King Does the King's Thing.
Right.
It was Albert King doing all Elvis Presley songs. That is a great album. Now, I know we made a good one. The publicity comes out with the three of us, the Jam Together album, where it's Roebuck Staples, Albert King, and myself, the three of us playing guitar on an album called Jam Together. And it was one of those, I guess those were released in 68. I forget how many albums it was because I'd be inaccurate if I said, but it was a bunch of them.
Right.
and that's when we were with, I guess, Paramount and putting out albums. And that was the transition going from a singles company at Stax to an album producing company, because singles weren't selling much anymore and albums were selling, concept albums of all kinds. And,
right.
So they wanted to, the powers that be wanted to jump on that bandwagon, and we did pretty good with it.
I'm a dying man, won't you give me water? My baby took my love and left me on the desert. I feel won't you give me water? Now I've heard many tales about a lonely drowning man, and I'm out here all alone, you know. I'm living on life I don't sing. Somebody, give me water. Why don't you just give me water? I won't you? Tell 'em out. Just the thought of her, you know it drives me all up inside, and I'm all numb with pain, 'cause I only have tears to taste. My mind is all messed up, won't you give me water, water? I don't know how I can make it, I just can't make it no further. Somebody, give me water. Why don't you just give me water? Now won't you? Water, water. I need some water. Hey, water. Need some water. Give me water, Albert. Hey.
A lot of good things came out of it, like the Staple Singers and so forth. Isaac Hayes is one of the greatest examples on the planet that came out of that era.
Yeah, of course.
And I think one of his records had two songs on one side and three on the other. I mean, they're all 15 minutes long, but, you know, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, great
They
stuff.
pull that off.
I have a question from a fan, and it's from a fan named Lee McCormack, and he wants to know, ask Steve about songwriting with Eddie Floyd at the Lorraine Motel
All right.
in Memphis. I love the song Water. Any memories about that song?
Well, it wasn't. Water was one of the few songs that we wrote that was not written at the Lorraine Motel. It was written at a Holiday Inn in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So that's where that's at. But historically, the room outside where Martin Luther King was standing at the balcony outside his room on the second floor of the Lorraine Motel,
Right.
and that's where he was assassinated. If you go straight down in one room over, that's where we wrote "Knock on Wood," out by the pool.
Right.
The room in the back where we wrote a lot of hits, and the one where we wrote with Wilson Pickett. We wrote we wrote 99.5 with Wilson in that room. That's not there anymore. That's been torn down and part of the museum. But the part they kept that part with a pool out there in the very front of the motel. And we wrote so many songs at the Lorraine Motel, I couldn't even identify all of them. But I do know 99.5, Knock on Wood, and those kind of things were written there. And 6, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, Eddie and I wrote there in the back. And that room's not there anymore. We wrote that in the honeymoon suite. Whenever it was open, go ahead.
I was gonna say, why the motel? Like, how do you end up in a motel as a regular?
Well, that's where the artists wanted to stay. That's where we put them, and I'd go down and write with them.
Oh, right. That makes sense. So you said Water was written in D.C. That was a separate beast.
That was that morning. Eddie came by to pick me up to take me to the airport, but my flight wasn't until noon or something, and it was early, like 9-ish or something like that. And I opened the door and I said, I just ran my bath water, and they didn't have showers in those days. True story. There wasn't a shower in that room, just a bathtub.
Right.
And I said, I just ran my water. Do you mind if I go ahead and take my bath real quick? And then, we had, a long time before you didn't have to be at the airport 2.5 hours before the flight in those days. You could show up 5 minutes before the flight and still make it. But anyway, and he said, yeah, go ahead and do that, and I'll just sit and wait on you and whatever. And I jump in the tub and the water's slashing around. I'm going, I got it. Eddie, I got it. I got up and toweled off real quick, go running in there. I said, Eddie, I've got it. He goes, what? I said, water. He said, water? You can't write a song about water. I said, yeah, you can. Watch me. I don't make this stuff up. And I did it, and I tell that story in my show. And I said, give me my guitar and I'll show you. So we wrote a song about water. And it was about, a guy, we just hit all the points about being on the desert and all that sort of stuff. I'm a drowning man. Won't you give me water?
Nice.
And knock on wood to me is the funniest thing, because Eddie, I got to the Lorraine Motel, and he said, man, I want to write a song about superstitions. And I'm going, well, okay, that's not a bad idea. And we thought of everything, rabbit's feet and walking under a ladder and opening an umbrella, when it's not raining inside. All these superstitions, black cats and you name it. And we went through the gambit of everything, from breaking champagne glasses to throwing salt over your shoulder to you name it.
Right.
And none of them really stuck as being, like super powerful or whatever.
Right.
And we just ran that whole gambit. There must be, I don't know, when you think about it, there's probably 15 or 20 different superstitions that people are superstitious about. And I said, and we hadn't hit this one yet, and I'm sitting there, and I said, Eddie, I said, wait a minute. I said, what do people always do for good luck? He said, well, they knock on wood. And he knocked on the chair, and I said, there's our hit.
There you go. Awesome.
And we wrote it. And it was about the superstition. I don't want to lose this good thing that I got. I don't want to lose my girlfriend. I'm going to knock on wood for good luck that I never lose my girlfriend. And that's what the song was all about.
Have you ever thought about? Obviously you're still going strong, and you're working on a new record, which I want to ask you about. But have you ever thought about putting together an autobiography?
No, but about 500 other people have. That's my definitive answer. I don't know.
I feel you.
About things like that. But yeah, I get that request all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure. How about in terms of? I guess when you're ready, right?
Yeah, I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon.
Right.
My time's been up for a long time, but I've got a lot of free time left. So, I'm starting to think about giving it some serious thought.
Right.
And I think most of it is who do I do it with, and I don't have time to do it all on my own, but I'll sometimes think about it seriously. And I've met with a few people about it, and never did follow up.
Maybe someday.
I've done interviews about it, and with great book writers and whatever, but just haven't gotten serious about it.
Right on. Have you heard in terms of Stax nowadays? Have you heard some of the new artists like Nathaniel Rateliff or Ben Harper? Do you like these guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's some I like, and some I go, well, good luck. It's like. It's funny. It's not. I don't know. It takes a combination. If you've got a hit artist that's really talented and really has great showmanship, and ability to go out and entertain a crowd, that'll work for a live thing. But if you want to make them famous, you got to get them a hit song. So there's a lot of people that they call them. There's a lot of great talent that was only lucky once to get a good song. What I'm getting ready to say, I don't mean it in a negative way, but there are a lot of artists that come across great songs and have a great performance in the old days when you could hear it on the radio and not be able to go out and perform in front of an audience.
Right.
They just don't have the natural talent or the knack for doing it. They go out there, there's a lot of great talent that's very nervous about going on stage, but they still pull it off. They're incredible, most of them. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I've never really been real nervous about going on. A little bit of apprehension about, you hope everything goes well.
Right.
As a package, but individually, I don't get butterflies. And there are artists that literally are backstage upchucking before they go on. They're so nervous about it.
Yeah.
They get out there, they're fine, but a lot of people don't know that, and it doesn't need to be publicized. But there are a lot of, I guess I've referred to them, or we have, as fly-by-night artists.
Right.
Not the one-hit wonders. There's a lot of one-hit wonders. Eddie Floyd has had so many great songs and great records, all well accomplished, but his one hit is Knock on Wood. That goes without saying. He's got that one hit. Even though he sold a lot of records and had a lot of chart action. William Bell did the same thing. Carla Thomas did the same thing. Carla Thomas had Gee Whiz.
Yeah.
She never did top that. Eddie had a lot of great hits, a lot of great chart records, but he never topped Knock on Wood. He never had a record that did any bigger than Knock on Wood. That's the thing. So I don't know. And I guess Otis gets pegged with Dock of the Bay. He had many, many hits.
Yeah.
I thought that it was just fabulous, but nothing ever really topped Dock of the Bay.
Yeah. Well, some of these new guys.
But they could entertain, if you know what I'm saying. That was
right.
the point I was trying to make, that they're really, really good entertainers. Eddie Floyd is one of the best entertainers on the planet. And the only way to prove that is go to one of his shows, and you'll just go, my God, that guy's incredible. And, he's 80-something years old, and he goes out there and sings like a teenager and dances and entertains people and moves across the stage and talks to the audience and does all those great things that you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
He doesn't just stand there just like a stick.
Sam Moore.
People to love him. He doesn't do that. He works for it. He goes out and works and gets that audience worked up and gets them. They're on his team. They're on his side.
That's awesome.
And that to me is real entertainment.
Yeah, Sam Moore these days. Have you seen Sam Moore recently?
Not live in the last year or so. No.
Yeah, he's still doing his deal. Just amazing.
Sam can sing better than anybody. He's just phenomenal. There's no question about it. And my favorite thing to watch him do, and I'm sure he still does, is when he steps away from the mic.
Right.
He doesn't carry it with him like the loudest thing in the room. He gets people to get quiet and listen to what he's singing. And he'll walk over to the side of the stage without a mic and sing. And you just go, my Lord, this guy's incredible. So That's showmanship in anybody's language, and that always gets a crowd. That's his stick. He does it a little different than anybody else, but he's also good at what he does. So
yeah, no doubt.
Amazing. And they were amazing. As a team, they were amazing. I mean, he was a team player whenever Sam and Dave, they probably danced better than any duo on the planet.
Yeah, no doubt.
I don't know anybody else that ever tried to imitate or follow that very much. There may have been some that I didn't see it. The Blues Brothers, of course, was real easy to imitate. All you had to do is act crazy and wear hat glasses and a skinny tie.
Right. Right.
So it was easy to imitate the Blues Brothers because it was identifiable. It was more of a, I don't know how you, I think it was more of a clothing thing than it was actual performing.
Right.
Even though they were great. When I say they were great, they were great.
Yeah.
Dan Aykroyd still is. But people in those days, there was a little bit of a backlash. Well, what are these comedians that we see every week? They're doing comedy. What are they doing up on stage doing art, singing really R&B? And I'm going, these guys can really sing. You don't understand that. Dan Aykroyd really does play harmonica. It's a little different. They just didn't get a chance to do it so much on Saturday Night Live. They were too busy reading script. And that's what it's about. But they're extremely talented.
And the fact that they had you guys, gives them all the cred in the world, right?
Well, they always took care of the band, and that was really nice. They probably credited us with more than we deserved. We could have just been a backup band, but they treated us as individuals, which is highly unlikely that anybody ever does that. They treat their band as a band, and that's about it,
Right.
They don't give them the time of day, but they were always promoting us. They was counting us in on stuff. If they're doing interviews, they're always talking about the band, individually and together. And so it's amazing that they would do that. I think that's great. And like I said earlier, that when Belushi got through singing this one song, he would say, Donald Duck Dunn, Steve Cropper. I mean, he didn't have to do that, but he did it.
Yeah.
Always giving us credit, so that's pretty cool.
That's awesome. So you did mention before we started recording that you're putting together a new Blues Brothers record.
We are, and it's been about time. Louie and I have been talking about it for a long time, and finally he said, Crop, we got to back a record. I said, well, we also have to do a show in the United States where people can see us. We work over here, but it's usually corporate for, a handful of people, and it's all very nice. But we did a show, Wednesday week ago in Manhattan and blew it out. It sold out, and the show was sold out, and they're still talking about it, which is cool. Well, we recorded on a Monday and a Tuesday, did a show on a Wednesday. And we got 9 sides in, which is great. Eddie Floyd came up and did a couple of sides with us. Paul Schaefer came over and did some sides. Dr. John, Mac Rebenak came over and did some. We had Joe Louis Walker come over and sang with us, and he sang with us live at the show. We had Jose Feliciano come in as a special guest and sang with us at the end of the show, and it was unbelievable. Cool. So we did 9 songs complete, and we got to go back and cut 3 more, I think, next week. We're going up, not next week, but it is, basically. We go up on the 14th, record on the 15th, with no show this time. We're not going to perform anywhere. We're just going to go in the studio and record.
Right.
That's so awesome. We'll have a new album. There will be a new album with the original Blues Brothers band. And I say original. We had Tom Bones Malone played on some of it, and I just mentioned Paul Schaefer played on some of it. Right. Some of the old band members we've had in the past. The band that we're playing with now, presently, the bulk of those musicians have been together about 15 years. The band in itself has been on the road for 28 years, and Lou Marini, we call him the dancing dishwasher from the first movie,
right,
played on the first record, Briefcase Full of Blues, and all the movies and all the records, and he and I are still out there doing it.
Sweet.
Tom Bones Malone, as most fans would know, has been doing playing horn on the David Letterman show for a long, long time. He and Paul Schaefer, and now they're back. They can do stuff since they've decided not to do the show anymore.
Right.
I forget how many years it ran, but a long, long time. So I don't blame them for doing what they did, but we got them back from time to time, so it's pretty cool.
That's cool.
We still work. We're going to tour this fall. We go back out we go back out, I think, in August. And we do some in August, we do some in September, and then some in October.
Awesome. Anything else?
This will be 29 years.
29 years of Blues
29
Brothers.
years by most standards is a pretty long time, you know.
Right. That's cool.
Some guys have grandkids by the time they're 30.
It's true. All right, sir. Well, I want to thank you so much thanks for sharing all these
pleasure.
Wonderful stories. People can find you. Your website is playitsteve.com, right?
Right.
From the legendary Shout Out and Soul Man, of course,
Right.
Which is, paying dividends, right? It's funny, just to throw this in there, that was, you said that was just in one take, and you talk about the Blues Brothers always, Belushi always referencing you guys. That was probably a bit of a unique thing, getting a shout out like that, being,
Yeah, it was.
There's
no question.
You're not just the guy in the band then at that point, right? He gave you an identity,
Right. And even doing Saturday Night Live, Aykroyd would say, "I want you to step out with me." And when you do your, like, Soul Man,
Right.
the second intro, he wanted me to step out front. I said, "Really?" He said, "I want you to come up front. Come up front with me."
So cool.
I mean, that's amazing. Instead of just standing in the background and doing your thing, to be spotted out or whatever brought out. See, they always wanted to share their spotlight. It was amazing.
Well,
They would do that.
depending on how you look at it, they were basking in your spotlight, right? That's how
They were, and then when they put the movie together, Dan Aykroyd was diligently, he wanted the band to be in that movie. When Hollywood doesn't do that. Nothing, that's just not their format. They don't do that. And they said, your band can't be in the movie. We'll get extras, or we'll get actors to do this. And, they can. And how many movies do you see? And if you're a musician, they're not playing the instrument. And we were in the movie, so it was real easy for us to pantomime, or whatever you want to say, play to the tracks and know exactly what we played and where we played it. So it looks really live, and it's pretty amazing. Second movie, a lot of it was live. All of those overdubs in the end when they had all the different musicians. I forget how many we had up there, a bunch.
Yes,
the most
everybody
simulated on one stage at one time in a movie.
Yeah.
And that was all live. They were playing to a track that we recorded about a week before. We were pantomiming, but all those solos were live, recorded live. So it's pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
All right, man.
Again.
My pleasure. We'll do it again sometime.
I'm coming to you on a back road. Good
Thanks again for checking out this episode of Pods and Sods and my conversation with Steve Cropper. Super appreciated. You can find more of Steve at playatsteve.com, and you can find him on Facebook. He's pretty active, always on the road, always making news. He's always up to something, which is incredible. And hopefully we will get that autobiography someday. You can find more Pods and Sods at our website, which is podsodcast.com. You can find us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/podssods. You can find us on Stitcher. You can find us in iTunes. And hopefully you'll leave a rating or a review at all of those places or any of those places. Click some stars, click some thumbs up, say some nice words. We appreciate it. Having said all that, I close with some words of wisdom that I always close with from Mr. Bill Hicks. Thank you.
The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. And the ride goes up and down and round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride. And we kill those people. Shut him up. We have a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up. Look at my furrows of worry. Look at my big bank account and my family. Has to be real. It's just a ride. But we always kill those good guys who try and tell us that. You ever notice that? And let the demons run amok? But it doesn't matter, because it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. A choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever in peace.